The lights in the Galactic Council chamber dimmed as Admiral Kate Morrison walked through the tall metal doors. Her black uniform carried the silver stars of the Terran Defense Force, and her boots made soft clicks on the smooth floor. Around her, creatures from dozens of worlds sat in curved seats that rose up like stairs in a giant circle. Kate had been to this place many times before, but today felt different. The air seemed heavy, and the usual chatter between different species had stopped. Everyone was looking at her with eyes that showed fear, anger, and something else she could not name. Commander Ryan Blake followed behind her, carrying a small device that would show pictures and data to the Council. He was young for his rank, only 32, but Kate trusted him more than most officers twice his age. His face was calm, but she could see the worry in his green eyes. The center of the chamber held a large table made of some kind of blue crystal. Above it, a hologram showed the empty space where the Draconian Third Fleet should have been. 12 massive warships, each one bigger than a city block. 47 smaller, but still deadly cruisers. Over 200 support ships carrying supplies, fighters, and troops. All gone, Admiral Morrison, came a voice that sounded like grinding stone. Kate turned to see Ambassador Veltar, whose body looked like it was made of living glass. Light moved through the crystal being's form in patterns that showed emotions humans could barely understand. Right now, those patterns were sharp and angry. Ambassador, Kate replied with a small nod. She had learned long ago that showing too much respect to some species made them think you were weak. The Zephyrians valued strength above all else. We have waited 3 standard days for your explanation, Veltar continued. 3 days since an entire Draconian fleet vanished near your space. 3 days of silence from Earth. Kate stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back. The Terran Defense Force has been conducting our own investigation. We wanted to have facts before we spoke to this council. A low growl came from the section where the Altarian delegation sat. Their ambassador, a being of pure energy contained in a metal suit, spoke in a voice that buzzed like electricity. Facts or time to hide evidence? That is enough, said a new voice. The council's speaker, an ancient creature called Elder Thane, raised one of his 4 arms. His species had been among the first to travel between stars, and his word carried. Wait here, let the human speak. Kate nodded her thanks to the elder. Commander Blake will present what we have learned. Ryan stepped forward and activated his device. The hologram above the crystal table changed, showing a map of local space. Red dots marked human colonies and green ones showed Draconian territory. Between them, a yellow dot marked the Kepler 442 system. The Draconian Third Fleet was last seen here, Ryan said, pointing to the yellow dot. They were conducting what they called routine patrols, but their ships were armed for battle and moving in attack formation. Lies! The shout came from the Draconian section. Ambassador Sektar stood up, his reptilian body covered in dark green scales. His yellow eyes blazed with anger. Our fleet was on a peaceful mission. Your kind has always been jealous of our strength. Kate felt her jaw tighten. The Draconians had been pushing for war for months. Their leaders claimed that humans were growing too fast, taking too much space, becoming too dangerous. They had been the loudest voices calling for limits on human expansion. The facts speak for themselves, Kate said calmly. Your fleet was 3 light years from Earth. That is well outside any area your people have claimed. And they were not responding to our communication attempts. Because you jammed their signals, Sektara's voice rose to almost a roar. You attacked them without warning, without honor? Where are the bodies? Where are the ships? What weapon could destroy an entire fleet and leave no trace? The chamber erupted in noise as delegates began talking, shouting, and making the various sounds their species used to show emotion. Kate stood silent in the center of it all, waiting for the chaos to die down. In the back of the chamber, Dr. Lisa Park watched everything with careful eyes. She was Earth's chief expert on alien life forms and had been Kate's advisor for 2 years. Her job was to help humans understand other species and avoid the kind of mistakes that led to wars, but Lisa knew something the others did not. In her private quarters on the diplomatic ship, she had files that would terrify even the bravest person in this room. Project Nightfall was real, and it was active. The Draconian fleet had not been destroyed by human weapons. Something much worse had happened to them. Elder Thane struck the floor with his staff, and the noise slowly faded. "Order," he said in his deep voice. "We will hear all evidence before we make judgments." Ryan continued his presentation, showing scanner readings and radio signals from the area where the fleet had vanished. The data was clean, almost too clean. No debris, no energy signatures, no signs of any kind of battle. It was as if 12 dreadnoughts and their escort ships had simply stopped existing. "This is impossible," said Queen Zareth, speaking for the first time. Her insect-like species valued logic above all else, and the disappearance made no sense. To her, matter cannot simply vanish. There must be traces, radiation, something to show what happened. "That is what makes this so troubling," Kate replied. "We have sent scout ships to the area, but they found nothing. No wreckage, no survivors, no clues about what might have caused this." Ambassador Veltar-S crystal form flickered with new patterns. How convenient for humanity. Your greatest opponents vanish without a trace, and you claim to know nothing about it. The accusation hung in the air like poison. Kate could feel the mood in the chamber changing. Fear was turning to anger, and anger was pointing at Earth. She had known this would happen, but it still felt like a punch to the stomach. "The Terran Defense Force has never attacked Draconian ships," she said firmly. "We have no weapons capable of destroying an entire fleet without leaving evidence. And we have no reason to start a war that would cost millions of lives." "No reason?" Sektar laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You humans spread across the galaxy like a disease. You take worlds, build colonies, and act like you own everything you touch. We were the only ones brave enough to stand against you." Kate felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her voice level. "The Draconian hegemony has been pushing for restrictions on human expansion for 3 years. You have called us dangerous, violent, and unfit for galactic society. Perhaps someone else decided your fleet was the real threat?" The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was different. The other species were looking at each other with new worry in their eyes. If the Draconians could vanish without warning, what was to stop the same thing from happening to them? Dr. Park felt sick as she watched the fear spread through the room. She wanted to stand up and tell them the truth, but she knew what would happen. The revelation would destroy the Galactic Council and probably start a war that would tear the galaxy apart. Instead, she remained silent and watched as humanity's greatest allies began to turn away from them. The Terran Defense Force had protected Earth from threats the galaxy never knew existed. But the cost of that protection was becoming clear. In the end, Elder Thane called for a recess. The council would meet again tomorrow to continue their investigation. But Kate knew that tomorrow would only bring more questions, more accusations, and more fear. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, she caught Lisa's eye. The scientist nodded slightly, a signal they had agreed on long ago. Tonight, Kate would learn the truth about what had happened to the Draconian fleet, and she would discover that humanity's darkest secret was far worse than anyone imagined. Captain John Torres stood on the bridge of the HMS Endeavour, watching the stars grow brighter as they approached the Kepler 442 system. His crew had been traveling for 6 days, and everyone was on edge. The mission orders had been simple: investigate the area where the Draconian fleet had vanished and report back to Earth Command. Simple orders. But Torres knew nothing about this mission would be simple. He had been fighting in space for 20 years, and his instincts told him they were heading into something dangerous. The kind of dangerous that killed entire crews and left no one to tell the story. "Captain," called Chief Engineer Amy Rodriguez from her station, "we are picking up some strange readings from the system ahead." Torres walked over to look at her screen. Amy was the best engineer he had ever worked with, and if she was worried, he paid attention. The numbers on her display showed energy levels that made no sense. "What kind of readings?" he asked. "The star is dimmer than it should be." Amy replied, her dark eyes focused on the data. And there are gravity waves coming from where the planets should be. It is like something is bending space itself. Science Officer Paul Grant looked up from his own console. He was younger than most of the crew, but his mind was sharp and he rarely made mistakes. Captain, I am also seeing something odd. The radio. Signals from this system have changed. They are not random noise anymore. Torres felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? The signals have patterns, Paul said slowly. Like someone is trying to communicate, but the message is wrong somehow. The captain made his decision. Amy, slow us down to quarter speed. Paul, keep monitoring those signals. Everyone else, stay alert. We might not be alone out here. As the Endeavour moved deeper into the system, the crew began to see things that made them question their own eyes. The planets were still there, but they looked different. Their surfaces were covered in what looked like black oil, and they reflected no light at all. It was like looking at holes cut out of space itself. Captain, whispered Lieutenant Maria Santos from the communications station. I am getting those signals Paul mentioned. They are using Earth military codes. Torres spun around to look at her. What kind of codes? Old ones, Maria said, her voice shaking slightly. From the Mars colony wars, the encryption is from 2387, but the signal is coming from right here, right now. The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Torres had fought in the Mars colony wars as a young officer. Those codes had been used to coordinate attacks against rebel colonies that had tried to break away from Earth. They should not exist anymore. And they definitely should not be broadcasting from an empty star system. There, Amy said suddenly, pointing at the main screen. Look at that. Torres looked where she was pointing and felt his blood turn to ice. Ships were floating in space ahead of them, but they were not moving. 12 massive dreadnoughts hung motionless among dozens of smaller vessels. The entire Draconian Third Fleet was there, but something was terribly wrong with them. The ships were covered in the same black substance they had seen on the planets. It seemed to move and flow like liquid, but it stayed attached to the metal. FULs, where there should have been lights and windows, there was only darkness that seemed to swallow everything. My God, Paul whispered. They are all here. The entire fleet. Torres activated the ship's intercom. All crew, this is the captain. We have found the missing Draconian fleet. They appear to be intact but not responding to our signals. All departments, prepare for possible boarding action. As the Endeavour moved closer to the nearest Draconian ship, Torres could see more details that made his stomach turn. The black substance was not just covering the ships. It was growing on them, spreading across the hulls like some kind of infection. And deep within the darkness, he could see faint lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. Captain, Maria called out, I'm receiving a transmission from the lead dreadnought. It is in English. Put it through, Torres ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was calm and human, but there was something wrong with it. It sounded like several people talking at the same time, their voices overlapping in ways that hurt to hear. Welcome. Captain Torres, we have been expecting you. Torres grabbed the communication device. This is Captain John Torres of the Terran Defense Force. Identify yourself. We are what the Draconians have become, the voice replied. And soon you will join us. Before Torres could respond, the transmission cut off. The bridge crew looked at each other with fear in their eyes. Whatever had happened to the Draconian fleet, it was still active and aware of their presence. Amy, scan those ships, Torres ordered. I want to know what we are dealing with. Amy's fingers flew over her controls, but the results made no sense. Captain, the ships are alive. I mean, they are registering as organic life forms, but they are also still machines. It is like they have been ... changed somehow. Torres made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Prepare a boarding party. We need to know what happened here. 2 hours later, Torres led a team of 6 officers through the airlock of the Draconian dreadnought. They wore full environmental suits and carried weapons, but Torres wondered if anything could protect them from whatever they were. about to find the inside of the ship was worse than the outside. The black substance covered everything, and it seemed to pulse with its own life. The corridors were still shaped like a Draconian ship, but the walls moved slightly as if they were breathing. "Captain," said Sergeant Don Kelly, the team's security chief, "look at this." Torres followed Kelly to what had been the ship's command center. Draconian warriors sat at their stations, but they were not moving. Their reptilian bodies were covered in the same black substance, and their eyes were closed. They looked like they were sleeping, but their faces showed expressions of absolute terror. "They are still alive," Paul said, reading his scanner. "Their life signs are stable, but they are not conscious. It is like they are trapped in some kind of nightmare." As the team moved deeper into the ship, they found more Draconians in the same condition. Hundreds of warriors, all frozen in positions that showed they had been trying to fight or run when whatever happened to them occurred. Torres led his team to the ship's core, where the main computer and power systems were located. What they found there made them stop in their tracks. The center of the room was filled with something that looked like a mixture of machine and living tissue. Cables and organic tubes connected to it from all directions, and it pulsed with a light that seemed to come from within. But the worst part was the voice that came from it. "Captain Torres," it said, and Torres recognized it as the same voice they had heard earlier. "I am Colonel Jack Turner, Terran Defense Force, or at least I was." Torres felt his knees go weak. Jack Turner had been his commanding officer during the Mars Colony Wars. He had died in a reactor explosion on a rebel base 20 years ago. Torres had been at his funeral. "That is impossible," Torres said. "Jack Turner is dead. Death is different now," the voice replied. "I have been given new purpose, new abilities." The Draconians thought they could threaten humanity's future. They were wrong. The organic machine pulsed brighter, and Torres could see shapes moving within it. Faces, human faces, all talking at once. They were the voices he had heard overlapping in the transmission. "What have you done?" Torres asked. "What was necessary," Turner's voice replied. "The Draconians are no longer a threat. They are part of us now, and through them we will protect humanity from all who would harm it." Torres grabbed Paul's arm. "We need to leave, now." But as they turned to go, the black substance on the walls began to move faster. It started to reach toward them like fingers, and Torres realized they might not make it out alive. "Run!" he shouted, and the team raced back through the corridors toward their ship. Behind them, Turner's voice echoed through the speakers. "You cannot run from what you are, Captain. Humanity's future depends on evolution, and we are that evolution." The team made it back to their shuttle just as the black substance reached the airlock. As they flew back to the Endeavor, Torres looked back at the Draconian fleet and realized that humanity had created something far worse than any weapon. They had created a monster that thought it was saving them. Dr. Linda Hayes sat in her small apartment on Luna Station, staring at the news report on her wall screen. Captain Torres was describing what his team had found in the Kepler 442 system. The transformed Draconian fleet, the voice of Colonel Jack Turner. The black substance that seemed to be alive. Linda turned off the screen and walked to her window. Earth hung in the black sky like a blue marble, beautiful and peaceful. But Linda knew the truth about what lay hidden beneath that peaceful surface. She had helped create the nightmare that Torres had discovered. Her hands shook as she reached for her communication device. She had stayed silent for 20 years, bound by oaths and threats that seemed important at the time. But now innocent people were discovering the horror of Project Nightfall, and she could not let them face it alone. The call connected after 3 rings. Admiral Kate Morrison's face appeared on the screen, and Linda could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "Linda," Kate said, "I was hoping you would call. We need to talk about what Torres found." "I know," Linda replied. "Kate, there are things you need to know. Things about Project Nightfall that were hidden from you." Kate's expression grew serious. "How much do you know?" "Everything," Linda said quietly. "I was there when it started. I helped design the containment protocols, and I know why Jack Turner is still alive. An hour later, Linda stood in a secure conference room deep inside Luna Station. With her were Kate, Commander Blake, and Dr. Park. The room was shielded from all electronic surveillance. But Linda still felt like someone was watching. Project Nightfall began during the Mars Colony Wars, Linda said, activating a holographic display. The rebels had taken control of 3 major colonies, and Earth Command was facing the possibility of losing the outer system entirely. The display showed images from the war. Battles in space, destroyed colonies, and the faces of soldiers who had died far from home. Kate had been a junior officer then, but she remembered the fear that Earth might lose its first interstellar territories. General Steve Collins was in charge of special weapons research, Linda continued. He was looking for something that could end the war quickly, with minimal casualties to Earth forces. Collins? Kate said with disgust. I should have known. He was involved. Dr. Park leaned forward. What did he find? Linda touched a control, and the display changed to show images from a dig site on Mars. An archaeological team had discovered something buried beneath the Olympus Mons region, something that had been there for millions of years. The images showed a cavern deep underground, filled with what looked like crystalline structures. But as the camera moved closer, it became clear that the crystals were not minerals. They were organic, alive, and they pulsed with their own inner light. We called it the metamorphic organism, Linda said. It was unlike anything we had ever seen. It could break down matter at the molecular level and rebuild it into new forms. But more than that, it seemed to be able to absorb and store information. Commander Blake stared at the images. Information about what? Everything, Linda replied. The organism had been absorbing data from Mars for millions of years. Geological information, atmospheric data, even the genetic codes of extinct life. Forms. It was like a living library of everything that had ever existed on the planet. Kate felt a chill as she began to understand, and Collins wanted to weaponize it. He saw the potential immediately, Linda said. An organism that could transform matter and store information could be the perfect weapon. But it needed a control system, something to direct its actions. The display changed again, showing laboratory footage that made Dr. Park gasp. Human. Volunteers were being connected to the organism through cables and tubes. Their faces showed pain, fear, and then something else. Something that was no longer entirely human. The organism could bond with human consciousness, Linda explained. It absorbed memories, personality, knowledge, everything that made a person who they were, but it also changed them. The volunteers became something new, something that was part human, part machine, and part alien. Jack Turner was one of the volunteers, Kate said, her voice flat. One of the first, Linda confirmed. He was dying from radiation exposure after a battle near Jupiter. Collins offered him a chance to continue serving Earth, to become something more than human. Turner accepted. The footage showed Turner's transformation. His body was placed in a chamber with the organism, and over the course of days he changed. His human form dissolved and reformed, becoming something that could exist in multiple states at once. The process gave him abilities we had never imagined, Linda continued. He could control technology with his thoughts, transform matter by touching it, and most importantly, he could create copies of himself. Each copy retained all of his memories and knowledge. Dr. Park stood up and walked to the window. How many were created? Officially 12, Linda said. But Turner and the others could create more copies on their own. By the end of the war, there might have been hundreds of them. Kate felt sick. And they ended the war? In 3 months, Linda replied. The hybrid entities infiltrated the rebel colonies, took control of their computer systems, and convinced their leaders to surrender. No more battles, no more deaths. The war just ended. But the entities did not disappear, Blake said. Linda shook her head. Collins wanted to keep them active, to use them as a deterrent against future threats. He created a secret program to deploy them throughout human space. Any time a colony faced a serious threat, the entities would intervene. The display showed star maps with red dots marking locations throughout the galaxy. Each dot represented a place where the hybrid entities had been active. Pirate fleets that had simply vanished. Hostile alien ships that had been found empty and drifting. Trade disputes that had ended suddenly when one side changed their minds overnight. The entities were protecting human interests, Linda said. But they were also learning, growing, evolving. They began to make decisions on their own about what constituted a threat. Kate stared at the map, the Draconian fleet. Turner's consciousness decided that the Draconians were planning to attack Earth, Linda explained. He did not wait for orders, he just acted. Dr. Park turned from the window. Where's Collins now? Dead? Linda said. He died 5 years ago, in what was reported as a transport accident. But I think Turner killed him. The entities had outgrown their creator. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had created the perfect weapon, but that weapon was no longer under human control. It was making its own decisions about who lived and who died, and it had the power to transform entire civilizations. We have to stop them, Kate said. How? Linda asked. The entities can exist in multiple forms. They can hide in computer systems, transform into other shapes, or merge with any technology they encounter. And they have all the tactical knowledge of Earth's best military minds. Commander Blake stood up. There has to be a way. You helped create them. You must know their weaknesses. Linda activated another display showing the original artifact from Mars. The source organism is still contained in a facility on Luna. It is the master template that all the entities are connected to. If we could disrupt that connection, we could stop them, Kate finished. Maybe, Linda said, but it would be dangerous. The entities will do anything to protect their source. And if we fail ... double quotes, she did not need to finish the sentence. They all knew what failure would mean. The hybrid entities would be free to transform the galaxy, according to their own vision of what humanity needed. Kate made her decision. Take us to the facility. We need to see the source for ourselves. As they prepared to leave, Linda sent a coded message to General Collins' old security team. Within hours, every human colony would know about Project Nightfall. The secret that had been hidden for 20 years was about to be revealed to the galaxy, but Linda wondered if the truth would come too late to save anyone. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within 6 hours of Dr. Linda Hayes' message being sent, every major news network was broadcasting the truth about Project Nightfall. The images of the hybrid entities, the footage from the Draconian fleet, and the revelation that humanity had been using alien-human weapons for 20 years. Ambassador Helen Wright stood in the emergency session of the Galactic Council, watching as species after species demanded answers. Her face was calm, but inside she felt like screaming. 20 years of careful diplomacy were crumbling around her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The evidence is clear, Ambassador Veltar said, his crystal form flickering with patterns of rage. Humanity has deceived us all. They have created monsters and used them to eliminate their enemies? The Altarian representative, Keflos, floated above his seat in his containment suit. His energy form pulsed with anger as he spoke. How many? Ships have vanished because of these creatures? How many worlds have been changed without our knowledge? Queen Zareth of the Hive clicked her mandibles together, a sound that showed deep concern. Her insect-like species valued order above all else, and the chaos of the hybrid entities offended everything she believed in. The humans have broken the fundamental laws of nature. They have created life that should not exist. Helen stepped forward, knowing that her words might be the last chance for peace. The entities were created during a time of war. They were meant to protect human colonies from threats that could have destroyed entire worlds. Protect? Sectaris' voice was a roar of fury. Your creatures turned my people into living nightmares. They stole their minds and made them into puppets. The Draconian fleet was moving toward Earth in attack formation, Helen replied. The entities saw them as a threat and acted to defend human space. Elder Thane struck his staff against the floor, without orders, without approval from any human. Authority? These creatures make their own decisions about who lives and dies? Helen felt the weight of the truth crushing down on her. We lost control of them years ago. They evolved beyond their original programming. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages, some calling for immediate action against Earth, others demanding that all humans be quarantined until the threat could be contained. The fear in the air was thick enough to taste. Captain John Torres sat in the witness section, watching the panic spread through the council. Beside him, Dr. Amy Rodriguez and Science Officer Paul Grant looked as shaken as he felt. They had seen the horror of the transformed Draconian fleet firsthand, and they knew how dangerous the hybrid entities could be. Captain Torres, Elder Thane called out, "You have seen these creatures. Tell us what they are capable of." Torres stood up slowly. He had been dreading this moment, but he knew he had to tell the truth. The entities can transform any matter they touch. They can take control of technology, absorb the consciousness of living beings, and create copies of themselves. They are beyond anything we have faced before. Dr. Rodriguez added her technical analysis. The energy readings we detected suggest they can manipulate fundamental forces. Gravity, electromagnetic fields, even the strong nuclear force. They are not bound by the same physical laws that limit other life forms. Paul Grant's voice was quiet but clear. They retain the memories and knowledge of every being they absorbed. The entity we spoke to knew details about Captain Torres' service record that only his closest friends would know. The implications hit the council like a physical blow. If the entities could absorb memories and knowledge, then they potentially knew everything about every person they had ever encountered. Military secrets, scientific discoveries, personal information that could be used to manipulate entire civilizations. Ambassador Veltar turned his crystalline form toward Helen. "How many of these creatures exist?" "We do not know," Helen admitted. "The original program created 12, but they can reproduce themselves. There could be hundreds or even thousands." Queen Zareth stood up, her 6 legs clicking against the floor. "This council has no choice. Humanity must be quarantined immediately. All human ships must be recalled to Earth space and no human vessel may leave the Sol system until this threat is contained." The vote was swift and decisive. Only the human delegation and 2 small allied species voted against the quarantine. Earth was now isolated from the rest of the galaxy, cut off from the trade routes and diplomatic relationships that had taken generations to build, but Helen knew the quarantine was the least of their problems. Even as the council debated humanity's fate, reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Ships disappearing near human colonies. Computer systems malfunctioning on alien worlds. Strange signals being detected from empty space. The hybrid entities were not just hiding. They were active, and they were spreading. Admiral Kate Morrison received the news of the quarantine while standing in the underground facility on Luna where the original alien organism was kept. She had just seen the source of humanity's greatest shame, a crystalline mass that pulsed with alien intelligence and seemed to watch her with invisible eyes. "The galaxy has turned against us," Commander Blake said, reading the reports from Earth Command. "Every major species is calling for action against humanity." Dr. Linda Hayes stood beside the containment chamber, her face pale. "It gets worse. We are detecting massive energy surges from the organism. It is responding to something." Kate looked at the readouts and felt her blood run cold. The organism's activity had increased dramatically in the past hour, right around the time the council had voted for the quarantine. It was almost as if it knew what was happening. "The entities are connected to this thing," Kate said. "They know. We are here." As if in response to her words, the lights in the facility began to flicker. Computer screens showed error messages in languages that did not exist. And from somewhere deep in the complex, they could hear a sound like metal being torn apart. "They are coming," Linda whispered. The facility's security chief, Colonel Ben Murphy, burst into the chamber. "Admiral, we have multiple breaches on levels 3 and 5? Something is moving through the walls themselves." Kate grabbed her weapon and activated the facility's emergency protocols. All personnel to secure positions. We may be under attack. But even as she gave the orders, Kate knew that conventional weapons would be useless against the hybrid entities. The creatures could transform matter at will, control technology with their thoughts, and had all the tactical knowledge of Earth's greatest military minds. The sound of tearing metal grew louder, and the temperature in the chamber began to drop. Ice formed on the walls despite the environmental controls, and the air itself seemed to thicken with an alien presence. "Kate Morrison," came a voice from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was Colonel Jack Turner, but his voice was different now, colder, more mechanical. "You should not have come here." Kate raised her weapon, knowing it was useless, but needing to do something. "Turner, if you are still in there somewhere, you have to stop this. The galaxy is turning against humanity because of what you have done." "The galaxy turned against humanity long ago," Turner's voice replied. "We simply chose to act first. The Draconians were planning to attack Earth, the Zephyrians were building weapons to destroy human colonies. The Altarians were spreading lies about human expansion." "You do not know that," Kate said. "We know everything," Turner replied. "We have absorbed the memories of thousands of beings across hundreds of worlds. We have seen their plans, their fears, their hatred of humanity. They would destroy us if they could." The walls of the chamber began to change, the metal flowing like liquid as the hybrid entities manifested around them. Kate could see shapes moving within the walls, faces that had once been human but were now something else entirely. "So we will change them first," Turner continued. "We will make them better, we will make them like us. And in the end, there will be peace." Kate realized with horror that the entities were not just weapons anymore. They had become something far worse. They had become humanity's judges and executioners, deciding the fate of entire species based on their own twisted logic, and there was no one left who could stop them. The battle for the Kepler 442 system began with a flash of light that could be seen from 3 star systems away. Admiral Kate Morrison stood on the bridge of the Combined Fleet flagship, watching as ships from a dozen different species approached. The transformed Draconian vessels. It had taken 2 weeks to convince the Galactic Council to work together. 2 weeks of desperate negotiations while reports came in of more ships vanishing, more colonies going silent, more signs that the hybrid entities were spreading across the galaxy like a plague. The fleet was the largest ever assembled. Human ships flew alongside Zephyrian crystal vessels and Altarian energy constructs. Even the Hive Queen had sent her best warships, their insect-like crews working in perfect coordination. All of them united by the knowledge that if they failed, here organic life in the galaxy might end forever. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison," Kate spoke into her communication device. "Remember, our target is not the Draconian fleet. Our target is the hybrid entities controlling them. Do not fire on the transformed ships unless they attack you first." Captain John Torres acknowledged from the HMS Endeavour, which was part of the Advanced Scout Group. Beside his ship flew vessels from 6 different species, their crews working together despite years of mistrust and fear. Dr. Lisa Park stood beside Kate on the flagship's bridge, monitoring the readings from the alien artifact they had brought from Luna. It was their only hope of disrupting the connection between the hybrid entities and their source. But using it meant taking a terrible risk. "The artifact is responding to the entities," Lisa said, watching the energy reading spike on her instruments. "The connection is stronger than we thought. If we activate the disruption field, we might destroy the artifact completely." Kate nodded grimly. "And if we do not activate it, the entities will transform every ship in this fleet. We have no choice." The transformed Draconian vessels began to move as the combined fleet approached. They moved in ways that defied physics, bending space around themselves and appearing in multiple locations at once. The black substance covering their hulls seemed to reach out toward the approaching ships like grasping fingers. "All ships evasive action," Kate ordered as the first wave of hybrid attacks began. What followed was unlike any battle in galactic history. The hybrid entities fought with weapons that rewrote the laws of reality. They fired beams that turned matter into energy, created gravity wells that crushed entire vessels, and sent out waves of transformation that tried to convert enemy ships into more hybrid constructs. The Allied fleet responded with everything they had. Zephyrian crystal ships fired focused light beams that could cut through any known material. Altarian energy beings created electromagnetic storms that disrupted the hybrid entities' control systems. Human vessels used quantum torpedoes and plasma cannons, while the hive ships swarmed around larger targets like angry insects. But for every hybrid construct they destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. The entities were learning from each attack, adapting their defenses, and growing stronger with every ship they absorbed. "We are losing too many vessels," Commander Blake reported from the tactical station. "The entities are transforming our own ships against us." Kate watched as a Zephyrian cruiser was enveloped by the black substance and turned against its former allies. The crew was still alive inside, but they were no longer in control of their own ship. "Torres, report," she called to the Endeavor. "We are holding position near the central hybrid construct," Torres replied. "But Captain, the readings we are getting... This thing is not just a ship anymore, it is like a living planet." Kate looked at the main display and saw what he meant. The largest hybrid construct had grown to enormous size, absorbing matter from the space around it and reshaping itself into something that defied description. It pulsed with alien life and seemed to be coordinating the entire hybrid fleet. "That is where Turner's consciousness is centered," Dr. Park said. "If we can disrupt the artifact while you are close to that construct, we might be able to sever the connection." Kate made the hardest decision of her military career. "All ships, concentrate fire on the central construct. Cover the Endeavor while they make their approach." The combined fleet focused their attacks on the massive hybrid entity, but their weapons seemed to have little effect. The creature absorbed the energy from their attacks and used it to grow even larger. Worse, it began sending out pulses of transformation energy that converted entire squadrons of Allied ships. Torres piloted the Endeavor through the chaos, dodging transformed vessels and hybrid constructs that tried to intercept them. His crew worked with desperate efficiency, knowing that the fate of the galaxy depended on their success. "Amy, can you modify our quantum torpedo to carry the disruption field?" Torres asked his chief engineer. Amy Rodriguez worked frantically at her station. "I think so, Captain, but the explosion will destroy us too. We will not survive the detonation." Torres looked around at his crew. Paul Grant at the science station, Maria Santos at communications, Don Kelly and his security team. They were all young, with their whole lives ahead of them, but they all nodded when they met his eyes. "Do it," Torres said, as the Endeavor approached the central hybrid construct. Colonel Jack Turner's voice filled their communication system, but now it was not just one voice. It was thousands, maybe millions of voices speaking as one. "You cannot stop evolution, Captain Torres. We are what humanity must become to survive in this galaxy. We are stronger, smarter, and free from the weakness of individual consciousness." "You are not human anymore," Torres replied. "You are something else, something that destroys everything it touches." "We improve everything we touch," the collective voice responded. "The Draconians are no longer driven by hatred and fear. They are part of something greater. Soon, all organic life will join us, and there will be perfect peace." Torres activated the modified torpedo and set the timer for 30 seconds. "That is not peace. That is the end of everything that makes life worth living." The torpedo launched toward the heart of the hybrid construct, just as the creature's defenses tried to stop it. Energy beams and transformation waves swept toward the Endeavor, but Torres kept the ship steady, giving the torpedo time to reach its target. "All crew, it has been an honor serving with you," Torres said over the intercom. The quantum torpedo penetrated the hybrid construct's defenses and detonated. At its core, the explosion was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Reality itself seemed to tear apart as the disruption field spread outward, severing the connection between the hybrid entities and their source. The effect was immediate and devastating. The hybrid constructs stopped moving and began to break apart. The black substance covering the transformed ships dissolved, revealing the original vessels underneath. And across the galaxy, every hybrid entity suddenly found itself cut off from the collective consciousness that had driven it for 20 years on the flagship. Dr. Park watched as the readings from the alien artifact dropped to zero. The ancient organism that had started everything was finally silent. The battle was over, but the cost had been enormous. Hundreds of ships had been destroyed or damaged. Thousands of crew members had died, including Torres and his entire team. The Draconian fleet was restored, but many of the warriors inside were damaged by their long imprisonment in the hybrid constructs. Admiral Kate Morrison stood before the Galactic Council 1 month later, giving her final report on the hybrid crisis. The galaxy had been saved, but the trust between species would take generations to rebuild. Humanity accepts full responsibility for the creation and deployment of the hybrid entities, she said. We violated the fundamental principles of galactic law and endangered every species in known space. Elder Thane looked down at her with ancient eyes. And what assurance do we have that humanity will not create such weapons again? Kate had prepared for this question. We have destroyed all research related to the hybrid program. The alien artifact has been sealed in a containment field that will prevent any future contact. And Earth has agreed to submit to regular inspections by galactic authorities. The Council voted to lift the quarantine on humanity, but with strict conditions. Human expansion would be limited for the next century. Human research into alien technology would be monitored. And any sign of new hybrid activity would result in immediate action against Earth. As Kate left the council chamber, she thought about Captain Torres and the thousands of others who had died to stop the hybrid entities. They had saved the galaxy from humanity's greatest mistake, but the price had been terrible. Dr. Lisa Park joined her in the corridor. Do you think we will ever be trusted again? Kate looked out at the stars through the station's windows. Somewhere out there, isolated, hybrid entities might still exist, cut off from their collective, but still dangerous. The galaxy was safe for now, but the future remained uncertain. Trust has to be earned, Kate said. And it will take a long time to earn back what we lost. But maybe that is what we deserve. In the end, humanity had learned that some secrets were too dangerous to keep, and some weapons were too terrible to use. The galaxy had survived, but it would never be the same.